There was a lot of debate on my website, and I actually posted a blog post about this. The movie Fanboys, which I just saw last night. Roger Ebert posted a very negative review of that movie, and he went on to, I believe, he called the kind of Star Wars fanboys depicted in the movie living like a stupid, pointless lifestyle. And I got a little offended by that, and I'm sure a lot of other people got offended by that. I'm not here to really talk about that. I've kind of gone over this ground a lot, mostly because Roger kind of recanted his earlier statements and kind of clarified. I don't buy it, but whatever, it's dead. I'm here to talk about the movie itself, because I said on the website the movie looked pretty bad. And guess what? It's pretty bad. It's not a good movie, but I had fun, if that makes sense. I'll try to explain. Really, it's the kind of movie that I wrote. Like, I wrote this movie called FLGS, and it's very, very similar in style. It's very Clerks-ish. It's about, three losers and an inexplicably hot chick who hangs out with them, basically talking Star Wars shit and nerd stuff for 90 minutes. And they have, like, a road trip, and they have a little adventure. It's full of Star Wars puns and stuff like that. I'm not saying what I wrote was good. I'm just saying, like, it's very nerd culture. It's very YouTube generation type humor. A lot of internet tropes, a lot of old Star Wars references. In that sense, it's really nothing remarkable, but it's very fun in the sense that its heart is in the right place. I actually thought a lot of times that the Star Wars references, the jokes, the costuming, the stereotypes were very, very over the top and unnecessary. And I had to kind of keep reminding myself that it was all in fun, and it's meant to be that way. It's meant to be very cartoonish. You're essentially watching a cartoon. You're watching the story. You have to remind yourself that it's the nerds themselves who are making these references about the same nerds. So you can't really be offended. You shouldn't really be looking for, arguments and reasons to be angry, because they're coming from the right place. It's a Star Wars geek making fun of himself most of the time. And I started to relax after a little while, because I began to realize you're really supposed to shout back at the movie. This is the kind of film where it's meant to be predictable. The puns are the Star Wars references are meant to be telegraphed like a mile away. Like, a guy points to his van and goes, "Do you really expect us to get to California in that rusted old shitbox?" And the guy points to his beat up van and goes, "Hey, she may not look like much, but she's got it where it counts, kid." You're meant to be able to shout lines like that back. There's several scenes where the fanboys get quizzed on Star Wars trivia. You're meant to be able to answer those questions and then shake your head in disbelief that you actually know that Luke Skywalker's call sign in Star Wars was Red 5. In that way, once you realize that, and once you start shouting back at the screen yourself, you begin to have a lot more fun than if you're just kind of sitting there kind of picking apart the weaknesses of the screenplay, the kind of childish nature of the characters, and the blatant, wide-open stereotypes of Star Trek fans, Star Wars fans, comic book fans, all that. Meant to be very cartoonish. That being said, here are the good things and the bad things about it. The good thing is that Kristen Bell is awesome in this movie. I mean, she was remarkably good in this film. Very hot, very sexy. And she's also one of the more unrealistic things about the movie. I mean, any girl who is that hot and can conceivably pull off a Princess Leia gold bikini is not going to hang out with geeks like this. And this is one of the more... I hate the cinematic cliche where the absurdly hot girl decides to really step beneath her station and hang out with the kind of socially retarded, caustic, really annoying, ugly as hideous fucking chud of a geek at the end of the movie. All those movies where like the supermodel decides to slum it with the really hairy, overweight beast. I never liked that cliche. And the thought of that guy's hands all over Kristen Bell is like... Ugh. Anyway. There were a lot of cameos. Some worked, some didn't. I don't want to spoil that too much for you because I'd rather you be surprised, but there is a cameo by Jason Mewes and Kevin Smith that really doesn't work. It comes off as really immature, blatant, and really not all that funny. Like, they just make a joke about how Jason Mewes sucks cock in Texaco bathrooms. We all knew that. You don't need to reference that, and I just didn't like that scene. You know, it was just kind of, you know, you got Kevin Smith on the set for like 10 minutes. Congratulations. Oh God, what else? Anyway, there are a lot of really good moments that had the theater laughing, and that's rare, I think, even in comedies, to get like total audience laugh moments where everyone is like belly laughing. This movie had those. There are several scenes, and they're just little quiet things. Like, there's a scene where they get trapped, and the chief gives them, like, peyote-laced guacamole, and they start tripping out. Like, they start looking at the stars. One guy starts laughing like a Jawa. There's an Ewok, like, a hallucinatory Ewok starts humping the guy's leg. That was a really great scene. And I've seen that scene in several other places, like The Rundown, but it still worked here. The movie had a lot of heart to it. You could tell it was made by fans, for fans, and that's why Roger Ebert didn't like it. Is because if you're not a fan of Star Wars, or if you're not kind of a fan of geek culture in general, if that's not your kind of humor, you have no business watching this film. It's not for you. If you're here, if you like Star Wars, if you like Star Trek, if you're into that kind of geek culture, if you're not over like 60, you would probably like Fanboys. You're not going to say it's a classic movie. You're not going to say that it was all that good. But you're going to say you had some fun with it. It's like, maybe like Rocky Horror. You wouldn't say necessarily that movie was awesome, but you have fun watching it with friends. If you understand what I'm saying, finally? But, okay, that's Fanboys. I love you guys. I love all fanboys everywhere. Oh, that was another thing. The movie makes a lot of... like, the central conflict of the entire movie is the rivalry between Star Wars and Star Trek fanboys. Maybe that exists, but I have never in my life witnessed a single moment of Star Wars, Star Trek conflict. Ever. And I hung out in a game store for years, and if there was anywhere that kind of shit was going to go down, it's either going to be at a convention, which I've been to conventions, not Star Trek conventions, but it's going to be either there or in a game store. And I never once witnessed a Star Wars geek and a Star Trek geek discussing, like, better ships, better captains, better bad guys, better enemies. None of that. I never saw it. It makes for some good humor, but at the same time, nerds are going to point that out, I think, and kind of feel like it's a bit fakey. I find, actually, that Star Trek geeks are more at war with each other in terms of, like, what was the better series, who was the better captain, explaining various anomalies, like time anomalies, like, you know, when did the Borg reach Earth? There was this huge argument on message board about when the Borg finally reached Earth because of all the time traveling that goes on with Q and Voyager and shit like that. Just various debates about minutiae within the Star Trek universe. Likewise, Star Wars, I find those guys are much more at war with each other about whether or not the prequels were any good. Now, they don't have that argument here because the prequels hadn't even come out yet, but, like whether or not Boba Fett is a chump or not, which they do have that argument. The incestuous nature between Luke and Leia, which they do argue about. The nature of the extended universe, like comic books and novels, in relation to the main universe, like, you know, what the best extended universe novels were, if they should make Timothy Zahn novels into movies, stuff like that. You know, just arguments about that kind of thing. Likewise, I think they missed out on a lot of opportunities to have them play the Star Wars West End RPG, which would have been pretty funny watching them kind of role-play characters. Maybe they cut that I would have cut that for time, but I've never really seen that rivalry between the two, such to the point where they're beating the shit out of each other and, like, raiding other conventions, you know, dressed like other characters. Also, there's a distinct, noticeable lack of identifiable Star Trek characters. I definitely could get the rights to that. The only real reference they managed to make is stuff like, you never see pictures or anything, you just see a guy go, Khan! Okay, but anyway, fanboys, I love fanboys everywhere. You keep waving that freak flag, okay? But if you like that kind of stuff, watch Fanboys. If you can find a theater it's playing at. I may have found the one theater in the world that was playing Fanboys. But bring some friends, you'll have some fun, and shout back the references at the screen, because I guarantee you it's much more fun if you just relax and, you know, relive those old memories, which is what the movie is about, is not necessarily whether the movies were any good or not, whether or not the prequels are any good or not. It's about getting together and watching an iconic series of movies with some friends and making endless fucking annoying references about them to people who just don't understand. So, that's Fanboys. Have a good day, everyone.